Hi everyone! So my name is Kylie and today we're going to be talking about aquaponics. Now that's a pretty big and scary word that you've probably never heard before, but don't worry, we're going to break it down and by the end of this you're going to be pros at explaining how it works. So we're going to talk about how it works, why it works, and then we're going to also take some time and draw our own aquaponics systems, and I'll even teach you how to make your own if you really want to. And this lesson is going to involve a lot of ecology stuff that I absolutely love talking about. Ecology just means the study of the environment. So let's get started. So let's start with something vaguely familiar. Where does the food you eat come from? Well, it comes mostly from farms. Farms that grow vegetables, cows, chickens, pigs, fruits, beans, and everything else. So when you grow fruits and vegetables in the ground using soil and sunlight, this is called agriculture. And when you grow fish in cages or closed-in spaces in the ocean or lakes, this is called fish farming. Or, if you're fancy and you want a bigger word for it, aquaculture. Aqua just means water, so you can always remember that fish live in the water, so that means aquaculture means raising fish for eating. In the picture you can see those big metal circles, and those are filled with hundreds of fish. Any kind of fish, really. Salmon, tilapia, mackerel, cod, trout, and whatever fish you eat. Fish farming is better than fishing in the oceans with big nets and rods because it does not take fish from the wild, so no fish species become endangered, and it does not capture fish or animals like sharks, seals, or turtles by accidents. And it's a lot cheaper than fishing in the ocean or in lakes. So even though aquaculture, or fish farming, is better than fishing in the ocean or in lakes, it's not perfect and it has some problems. These fish are often fed very specific medicines and foods that are not good for the environment and can pollute the water around their cage. Keeping the environment clean for them needs harmful chemicals that can hurt wildlife that don't live in the farm. The fish produce a lot of waste, so their feces, or poop, and urine, or pee, gets into the surrounding water too. This is a problem because in the wild, fish are constantly swimming, so their waste isn't all in one spot. But when fish live and grow in these farms, this can cause a lot of waste to build up in one area. Fish urine also contains a chemical called ammonia, which cannot be recycled or reused, which poisons the water. So in general, fish farms are bad for the water around them because they produce a lot of waste and pollution. So in this picture, you can see that there are a lot of fish in a small place, which means that there is a lot of waste produced. So even though fish farms do a lot of good by not endangering species in the wild and not accidentally capturing wildlife, they still have a lot of problems. Okay, we're going to take a minute and talk about symbiotic relationships. Now, that's a big word, but it's actually a really simple concept. Symbiosis is a close relationship between two species, so like a bird and a dog, for example, where at least one of them benefits. It is used to describe close and long-term relationships between different species. So you have a symbiotic relationship with your dog or your cat. You feed your dog and give him or her love, and they bring you lots of happiness, and maybe even protection, but it really depends on the type of dog. Some symbiotic relationships do not benefit both species, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. In this picture, you can see a bird with whatever animal that is. I think it's a yak. And these birds help the cows by eating bugs off their skin. The cows don't get bitten by the bugs, and the birds get a nice meal. This is an example of a symbiotic relationship. So the first type of symbiotic relationship is called mutualism. Mutual means that it goes both ways. This is where both species benefit, like the cow and the bird we just talked about. An example you might know a lot about is clownfish and sea anemones, like in Finding Nemo. Clownfish live in sea anemones. The sea anemones can shock predators and protect the clownfish in their homes. The clownfish waste gives nutrients to the sea anemones so that the sea anemones can live and grow. Both the clownfish and the sea anemone benefit or get something good from this relationship. Commensalism is a type of symbiotic relationship where one species benefits and the other is not affected. Nothing good and nothing bad. An example of this is with the remora fish and sharks. Remora fish attach themselves to the backs of sharks, like you can see in the picture, and eat leftover scraps from the shark meals. The fish do not affect the sharks at all. They don't hurt them, but they don't give the sharks anything either. The last type of symbiotic relationship we can talk about is called parasitism. This is my least favorite. This is where one species benefits and the other is harmed. And an example of this is with fleas with dogs or cats and mosquitoes with humans. Fleas live on dogs and cats and bite them to suck their blood, like little vampires. This is how the flea gets their meals and lives. The dog or cat is harmed because the bite itches, and fleas can carry diseases that can get into the dog or cat's body and hurt them. Mosquitoes are very similar. Mosquitoes bite humans for blood meals, and the human is harmed because the bite itches and it can get an infection. This is a bad type because it isn't very fair at all, though it does happen a lot. Okay, now we're going to talk about the rules of life. I promise we're going to talk about aquaponics soon, but in order to understand why aquaponics works, we need to talk about the rules of living things first. There are a lot more rules than this, but these are the very basic rules for being a living thing. Rule number 1, all organisms, so plants, animals, fungi, bacteria, or whatever, require certain things to live. Animals need water, oxygen, and food to live and grow. They need to eat, drink, and breathe. That makes sense. Plants, which are also living things, need water, carbon dioxide, nitrates, and sunlight. They use the nitrates almost like food. Usually plants get these nitrates from the soil, and we call this fertilizer. They use the sunlight in a process called photosynthesis, where they use the sunlight to make food for themselves. And they actually make sugar molecules, or glucose, using the sunlight and the carbon dioxide that they breathe in through their leaves. Isn't that crazy? Okay, rule number 2. All living things create waste. Animals breathe in oxygen and breathe out carbon dioxide, which our bodies can't use for anything. Animals also produce digestive waste, so poop and pee. This is totally natural and every animal does it. Plants also make waste. Plants breathe in carbon dioxide to use in photosynthesis, and they breathe out oxygen. So plants make oxygen for us to breathe in, and we make carbon dioxide for plants to breathe and use. That sounds a bit like a symbiotic relationship, right? Specifically, the mutualism type, where both species benefit from this relationship. Okay, now that we've talked about some rules for living things and how species live together, it's time to talk about aquaponics. Aquaponics is a combination of hydroponics, which is when you grow plants in water instead of soil, and aquaculture, so growing fish. So in this picture, you can see that the fish live below the plants, and we'll talk about why that works in a minute. When we grow these two things together, we create a new ecosystem, and the waste products from one system are removed or used by the other. This is a mutualistic symbiotic relationship, wow, that's a lot of words, between the plants and the fish. The water from the fish tank is pumped up to water the plants, and the plants clean the water while also making oxygen for the fish. So how does this work? Fish are grown in the tanks, and then they release their wastes, so ammonia and carbon dioxide, into the water around them. The water with the waste is pumped up to the gravel right below the plants. On the gravel there is bacteria, and these bacteria convert or change ammonia into something called nitrates, which, remember, is what plants eat. Usually plants get their nitrates from the soil, but in this system it just comes from the gravel and the water. The fish also breathe out carbon dioxide, which the plants use in photosynthesis. The water then drips down through the gravel, clean of ammonia. The plants produce oxygen for the fish, and then everything just cycles through. And the only thing that needs to be added is food for the fish and sunlight for the plants. So I'm going to teach you how to make your own aquaponics container. And you'll need a few things, and we're going to talk about each one. So you need a habitat, gravel, water, fish, and plants. So the first thing is a habitat. Every single living thing has a habitat. A habitat is the natural home or environment of an animal, plant, or other organism. So for monkeys, it might be the jungle, and for camels, it's the desert. So the habitat for our aquaponics system is a place for the plants and fish to live and grow. This habitat provides sunlight for the plants and a place to live for the fish and the plants. The next important part of our aquaponics container is gravel. This gravel is used to stabilize the bottles by weighing it down, and it also helps grow the good bacteria that make nitrates from ammonia in the fish waste. These nitrates are used as fertilizer or food for the plants. The next big part of our system is water. Every living thing requires water to live. The water we use has to be chlorine-free. Chlorine is a chemical that we use to make water clean, so we use it in a lot of pools. But it isn't very good for the fish, so the water we use in our aquaponics system has to be free of chlorine. We can clean our water in a few different ways. We can either use a Brita filter or leave the water out in the sunlight for a few days. This makes the chlorine evaporate. And this water cycles through the system, being used by the fish and the plants and being cleaned by the bacteria on our gravel. So a huge component of our systems is the fish. The fish complete the system and help make the tank healthy. In a farm, the fish can be raised and eaten for food. Fish breathe oxygen just like humans, but they get their oxygen from the water instead of the air. Fish produce ammonia as waste and breathe out carbon dioxide. Our last ingredient is the plants. Plants are living things just like you and me. In order to live, they need light, water, nitrates from fertilizer, and carbon dioxide. They absorb the carbon dioxide that the fish breathe out and use sunlight for photosynthesis and release oxygen. These plants clean the water and make oxygen for the fish. So, in my opinion, aquaponics is kind of amazing, right? It's this system that can exist on its own and it cleans itself. Aquaponics is better than fish farming and agriculture for a number of reasons. It produces less pollution, it can grow both fish and plants for food at the same time. The gardens are really easy to maintain because they clean themselves. They use less water than traditional farms for other plants because the water is kept clean by the system. They produce less chemical waste from pesticides, fertilizers, or other chemicals used to clean our food. And it's overall just healthier and better for the environment. So if aquaponics is so great, why don't we use it for all our food? Well, it costs a lot more money to do aquaponics than traditional fish farming, and it can be hard to maintain for a really long time, which is kind of the amount of time we need to produce a lot of fish and plants. And because it's a closed system, so everything just cycles through repeatedly, diseases can spread very easily between the plants and fish. So if you want to make your own aquaponics system, you'll need everything we just talked about. A clear container, something like a glass vase or a bowl, so that the plants can have sunlight for photosynthesis. Make sure the bowl or vase is big enough for your fish to have a good life swimming around too. A gravel to support the growth of the good bacteria, which turns fish waste into fertilizer. We need chlorine-free water, and we need a fish and some plants. I used to use a plant called pothos for my system, and I used goldfish. So if you make a system, you have to take care of it. It should be kept near a window so that the plants can have sunlight. The fish need to be fed, so it depends on the type of fish you get, but goldfish usually only need 1 to 2 flakes of food per day. And I know that it's tempting to feed them more, but it's really not good for them. It can make them sick or even kill them, and if they don't eat the food, it will make the tank dirty. If you miss a feeding, the fish will be okay, so don't overfeed them on the next meal. And again, the water must be chlorine-free, and this can either be done with a Brita filter, or you can use dechlorinating drops from the pet store, or you can leave out tap water for 24 hours and let the chlorine evaporate. So that about wraps it up for a lot of our kind of basic information about aquaponics. And it's time for an activity. We're going to draw out an aquaponics system with all its little components. We will need a piece of paper and something to draw with, so crayons, markers, or pencils. So go ahead and pause the video so you can go grab all your tools. Hi, so I'm going to walk you through how to draw out your own aquaponics system. And what we're going to do is we're going to draw the overall tank and the overall structure, and then we are going to kind of label where all of those different chemicals go that we were talking about, like carbon dioxide, oxygen, ammonia, sunlight, everything like that. So I'll walk you through that part. And of course, I would love for you guys to go out and make your own aquaponics container. However, not a lot of the pet stores are all open, and I want to make sure that you make the best aquaponics container that you possibly can, and that means using the right kinds of materials that you might not have access to right now. But in the meantime, we're going to talk about our drawings, okay? So you kind of have a better idea of how it works, and so that when you actually do make it, if you do, it'll be the best it possibly can, okay? So this is my drawing so far. So you see how we have two tanks, right? We have the tanks with the tank with the plants right above, and the tank with the fish right below. I drew little cute pink guys and nice leafy plants up top, but it really doesn't matter. You can draw flowers, you can draw goldfish, whatever you want. And then I have my sunlight, okay? So I have my nice leafy greens with their roots kind of sticking into gravel. I don't know if you are able to really see it. So the roots stick into the gravel, which is filled with water, right? And that water is getting pumped up from the fish tank. So the fish tank is right below, because there are two tanks, remember? And the fish tank goes below so that when the water gets cleaned up top, it just drips down. Perfect, right? And we'll draw that in later. So the fish live in the water on the bottom tank. The water gets pumped up to the top where the gravel is, where the plants sit, and in that water we have ammonia and carbon dioxide, and that ammonia gets converted by bacteria that we're not going to draw because they're super small, by bacteria that live on these gravel, and it gets converted into nitrates, which the plants eat. So in your drawing, I want to see a sun, I want to see two tanks, one right above the other, and make sure you put the plants up top, gravel, plants, fish, and water. Okay, can you do that? So again, that's mine, and go ahead and pause the video and make sure that you can kind of draw out everything that's in here. Okay, do whatever you want. Your sun doesn't have to be here. It can be right here. It can be a huge circle in the middle. You can draw it outside. You can draw some birds. It's really up to you. But make sure that you have those components that we've been talking a lot about, okay? And we'll kind of draw in everything else in a bit. Okay, so now that you've drawn your picture, we're gonna just talk briefly about where to put our arrows and where everything is going, okay? So the first thing that I wanna draw in is where the water is going, okay? So I'm gonna put a quick arrow and then I'm gonna show you. Interesting that I chose to do this in red. So like I said before, this pump takes the water from below and pumps it up to the top where the gravel is with the bacteria, right? And then you can see how the water drips down. Okay? Sounds good? Okay, so that takes care of water. No big deal. And do you remember what the water takes with it when it gets pumped up to the gravel? If you said ammonia, you'd be right, okay? So ammonia is a pretty big word. If you just say A, I'm okay with that. But I'm gonna use purple for this one. So the water takes with it ammonia. Okay? So water and ammonia are getting pumped up. And the gravel take the ammonia and they turn it into nitrates, which get eaten by the plants. So I'm going to draw an arrow going from the gravel to the plants, and that's going to talk about nitrates, or it's going to show that nitrates are going from the gravel to the plants. Okay? So one thing here, nitrates. Or fertilizer, you can say food, I don't really care. So again, nitrates going from the gravel to the plants. Okay? The next one is the carbon dioxide. So remember that when we breathe in oxygen. And when we breathe out, it's carbon dioxide. So the fish are just like us, they're animals, so when they breathe out carbon dioxide. So the next thing we're gonna put in is, need help picking a color, carbon dioxide. So the carbon dioxide is actually in with the water. So it's actually getting pumped up with everything else, with the water and the ammonia. Okay, so I'm gonna put it right here, and carbon dioxide. Okay, so we have water, ammonia, and carbon dioxide. I know it's backwards, I'm so sorry. But you have your three things getting pumped up through that pump from the fish tank into the plant tank. And that carbon dioxide, do you remember where it goes? Yes, the plants use it for photosynthesis. So that carbon dioxide is going to get converted into oxygen by the plants. And then the plants are going to release oxygen. And that oxygen is going to go back down into the fish tank with the rest of the water. Okay? So let me just kind of put that in. Okay, so the only things coming down are oxygen and water. Okay, and I think that actually takes care of everything that we have. The only other thing is sunlight. Remember, we've talked a little bit, I've talked a lot about how important sunlight is for plants. Yeah, sunlight helps them make their own food, which I would love to do, but it's not like they're photosynthesizing pancakes into their stomachs or whatever. They don't even have stomachs, but they are photosynthesizing their own food, and it's very cool, and they need sunlight and carbon dioxide to do it. So that's why I was really, really hoping that everyone put a sun in their picture, okay? So I'm just gonna draw an arrow from my sun to my plants and write sunlight. Okay? And actually, I think that about does it. So just to kind of recap, we have sunlight coming in to the plants, and the plants are getting their nitrates from the gravel, and they're getting carbon dioxide from the fish, and water from the tank below. And the water, ammonia, and carbon dioxide is getting pumped up from the fish tank. And the ammonia comes from fish waste. So it's in their, essentially their pee and their poo. And then the water gets pumped up and the ammonia gets cleaned. It gets changed into nitrates, which are good, which we like. We don't like ammonia, we like nitrates. And the water gets cleaned, it falls back down to go help with the fish. And the plants convert the carbon dioxide into oxygen so that the fish can use it. Isn't that cool? It's a whole self-contained system, and it really uses a lot of different concepts about how life works and how we all live together on this planet. So I really hope you enjoyed learning about aquaponics, and I hope you learned a little bit about how the world works. I really hope that someday you guys are able to make your own aquaponics container. If you get a fish, you can put a plant in it, and you can kind of tell all your friends how cool it is that this is whole self-containing cleaning system. Okay, so again, I really hope you enjoyed this video. I had a lot of fun making it, and I hope you guys have a really good week. Bye!